This interview is for information only and should not be considered as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this Stock Box interview. Joining us today is Ben Turney, the CEO of Kavango Resources. So Ben, it's been a little while since we've spoken. How are you doing?
Little under the weather at the moment, Mark, to be honest, but I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yes, very good, thank you, Ben. We're going to be talking today about the Ditau project, where, of course, you've announced that drill targets have been confirmed for the next exploration going on at the company. So can you tell us a little bit about this program then? It's rare earths and base metals that you're targeting, is that right?
It is. So the Ditau project is Kavango's oldest project. The original licenses were applied for back in 2012. Mike Moles' original goal at Ditau was looking for iron oxide deposits. That turned out to be a bit of a blind alley. So that sort of aspect of the project never went anywhere. But what's always been very interesting about Ditau is the nature of the geophysical anomalies. Hillary's done a huge amount of work on them over recent years, and we brought in Jeremy Brett as well, who I'll talk a bit about Jeremy's experience in a minute. People will obviously be aware of Jeremy's involvement in the KSZ, but he's also brought a great deal into Ditau too. But the project itself, it's been a bit sort of stop and start over the years. When Kavango first listed, they did do some drilling down in 2019. Unfortunately, there were some mistakes in the field from former team members. You know, they mistakenly used the XRF machine, and the company ended up putting some results out into the market that turned out, to be inaccurate once assay tests were received. But it was obviously quite a painful experience at the time back in 2019, but very valuable lessons were learned for the business. But what came out of all of that was this idea that the geophysical targets at Ditau could be what we call ring structures, which could be possible carbonatites. And as we explain in our RNS today, carbonatites are a form of alteration system that can host rare earth elements. Now, rare earth elements are in extremely high demand these days. They're integral to the green revolution. So a lot of high technology uses these rare earth elements to create circuit boards and sort of equipment that's become part of everyday life now. But one of the key challenges in this space is that I think it's over 90% of the world's supply of rare earths come directly out of China, which obviously puts China in a very dominant position in terms of the market, which strategically is obviously of concern for a lot of companies and a lot of nations. So any rare earth deposits that are found outside of China can tend to attract huge premium. Now, one of the real things that we're most excited about down at Ditau is the fact that the targets that we're looking for, as with up in the KSZ, they're buried under this Kalahari cover. And as our shareholders will know, Kavango's specialism that we've really been developing over the last few years has been to use modern technology, remote sensing technology, to look for drill targets that previously couldn't have been identified because of the presence of this sand cover. So we're very, very excited about this project. We've mobilised the rig as quickly as we could, following our successful campaign up in the KSZ. And we're looking forward to starting to drill the 3 targets we're going for.
Okay. So you've mentioned about the sand cover there, and this is something I picked up on the RNS, which does ring bells from, of course, the drilling at the KSZ that we've been speaking about before. Does this Ditau area, represent a technical challenge that perhaps, we were talking about? Does it have similarities in that regard to the KSZ?
So it is a technical challenge, but for different reasons. One of the main issues we found up in the KSZ was because of the depth of the holes and the particular drilling conditions that we were drilling into. The targets themselves were quite a lot deeper underneath Karoo sediments, and drilling through those Karoo sediments, which obviously are very different from the Karoo sands. So the sediments have been in place over tens of millions of years. Some of that ground was extremely difficult for us to work with. At Ditau, we're looking at much shallower targets with much shallower holes. So while the sand cover is obviously not ideal to drill through, our partner Mindea and Equity Drilling, they've shown they're more than up to the job of getting through the sand cover, which is relatively straightforward for them to work through. But thankfully, the actual drill targets themselves are much closer to the surface. So we're not expecting the same sort of challenges that we faced up in the KSZ. So drilling itself should be much easier. But the main challenge we really face, well, is twofold. First of all is water access. This is a very arid part of Botswana. So we're in the process of drilling a water borehole so that we've got our own dedicated water access for this campaign. But the second one, believe it or not, Mark, is actually lions. Ditau actually means lion in Setswana, and the area there's a lot of wildlife, a lot of game lives in the area. So we've had to make sure that we've taken a lot of precautions in terms of the camp setup to make sure everybody's obviously safe on site. So it's not like the KSZ, and assuming we've got the water challenge, got that resolved, drilling itself should be quite straightforward, so long as we don't have any problems with the local wildlife.
Well, I hope not. You have to keep your eyes peeled when you're out there exploring, that's for sure. Now, in terms of the planning for this program, Ben, and then the objective, you talk about these carbonatite ring structures, which suggest that there could be rare earths there. How have you come to that conclusion with all the pre-work you've done, and what is the objective, the primary objective for when you're doing this targeted drilling campaign?
Right, well, it's a very good question, Mark. So the work itself is pretty much exclusively geophysical. So what we've looked at is other carbonatites, geophysical signatures around the world. So we've used those to help compare to the models that we've created, which gives us this indication that we are looking at these potential carbonatite systems. But what we also have to look at is the regional geology as well. Now, we talk in the RNS today a lot about how carbonatites tend to occur in what are called swarms or clusters around the world, which tend to be controlled by geological trend lines. We've published a few maps on our Twitter feeds to show some of the regional trend lines that have these carbonatite kimberlites, which tend to occur together along these trend lines, these clusters, these swarms of these formations, both in Angola and also in Botswana. So there's quite a lot of circumstantial evidence. This sort of geological analysis, it's basically been desk work, map analysis, understanding of well-trodden ground in terms of previous exploration, because I'm sure you're aware Botswana was one of the world's leading diamond producers. So a lot is known about the kimberlite formations in Botswana and the controlling structures of those. But what we've done is we've followed up with our own geophysical surveys. So we've used combinations of EM, of magnetic surveys, and of course AMT. And the combination of these surveys give us what we feel is quite a clear picture of what's going on the subsurface, which gives us confidence to go forward and drill these targets. Now, in terms of testing the carbonatite potential, that should be fairly straightforward. It's quite easy to test, or relatively easy, I should say, to test whether or not you've actually encountered carbonatite itself. The tricky part will then be to identify rare earths. So in this first pass, our first objective is to confirm we've actually got carbonatites there. That would then obviously provide us with justification to continue more extensive accelerated exploration in future. But we're also testing the potential for base metals. Now, some of the signatures and the magnetic readings in particular that we've been looking at suggest we've got what are called mafic intrusives. So in other words, this is basically gabbro, similar to what we've been exploring for up in the KSZ. Now, obviously, until we actually drill these targets, we won't know for certain what is down there. We're the first company to go exploring for this kind of physical data. But following the success we had up in the KSZ, where we hit all of our objectives to understand a lot more about the underlying geology there, to refine our future models and obviously guide future exploration, we're looking basically for the same outcome at Ditau, with obviously the hope of maybe even intercepting some mineralization. But obviously, that's sort of that would be a nice to have at this stage. Right now, what we need is the evidence that our actual exploration theory holds water, and we can continue forward at Ditau.
Okay, so it's early stage. It's early stage exploration, is that right? Almost pathfinding.
It's a bit more than that, because we've drilled there in the past. We have done a lot of work over the years. The Falcon Bridge carbonatites that we've written about in previous RNSs one of the things that we've kept a bit under our hat, and we were actually quite surprised to find this out at the end of last year, but it turned out that Jeremy Brett had actually worked on those Falcon Bridge carbonatites 20 years ago when he was involved in the KSZ, or just after that. So he's pretty familiar with this exploration model and these three formations that have been proven historically to be carbonatites. It's unfortunate we've not been able to find the drill core from those. We have looked for it, but for whatever reason, it's not available. It would have obviously helped us with our current exploration, but based on the work that Jeremy has done on top of Hillary's excellent work, we're feeling very good about this campaign, and hopefully we'll be able to report some success later on this year.
Okay, so when are you starting then, Ben, and how long do you expect it to last for?
Well, we've already started in terms of camp preparation and mobilising the rig, so everything's underway. In terms of starting drilling itself, not exactly sure, but I would imagine sort of best guess, sort of couple of weeks' time. So second week of April, I think, is the provisional timetable. That's obviously subject to everything all going to plan. We'll obviously publish RNSs as is required, but also updates to the website as well, so that shareholders will be able to see development of the camp and obviously setting up of the rig.
Okay. Just thinking back to the KSZ, is that forgotten about now, or can we still expect to see some developments coming from there?
Oh, Mark, there's a huge amount to come from that project. Work has only really just begun. We finished drilling just over a month ago and have been working extremely hard since on analysing the data from the 4 holes that we drilled. I do understand why there's some reticence out there, and there are some people who say, they've just turned their back on the KSZ. They're now looking at the next shiny project. But the fact is that the project like the KSZ is very complicated. The data that we've managed to gather from this drill campaign is both very, very detailed and also quite substantial. So one of the things that we've changed at Kavango, and I reference back to that mistake that the company made back in 2019, something I've been rigorous about since I joined the board and effectively took over running the company last January, is to make sure that we absolutely crash test everything before we put any results out into the public domain. So while I do understand there's a bit of frustration out there, and I've had a few silly comments on Twitter, which I'm afraid just goes with the territory, the fact is that I'm not going to allow us to put results out into the public domain unless we've actually thoroughly tested them, and that we've got absolute confidence that what we're saying is completely accurate. Now, in terms of the KSZ, we've obviously got the petrology report. We've got work that we've done from lab testing, assay testing. There's more geochemical work that we're doing. We're doing more work in terms of planning out sort of next stages of exploration. We've got an extensive TDEM campaign that we've referenced in a recent RNS. We also have work we've been doing on basically looking at different mineralisation styles. Now, again, this is something we've referenced in various RNSs, but we haven't put that information out into the public domain yet. And Hillary and Jeremy have done some really fantastic work on updating our models of the KSZ. Now, those models are obviously exceptionally important because those basically are what provide us with a roadmap for future exploration. And what we've already said about the Proterozoic, which I think a lot of people have forgotten, but we hit 2 for 2 with the Proterozoic. With the 2 deep holes that we drilled, they both encountered the Proterozoic pretty much exactly where Hillary had modelled we would hit the Proterozoic. So that obviously gives us a great deal of confidence that in terms of that system in particular, we know where it is underground, so we now need to go and find conductors in that space. So watch this space on the KSZ, because there's also, of course, I can't believe I haven't mentioned this, there's the B1 conductor. It's now the primary conductor is 16,000 Siemens. It's a smaller body. It's a huge target for us to go back and drill once we're ready to go and drill that. And we obviously have this vertical, what we believe is a possible, I'm going to emphasise the word possible here, a possible feeder dike, which conforms exactly to the model that we were looking for in terms of our Karoo exploration. So there's more work to be done on that with the 2 TDEM surveys and the downhole survey that will be coming up. So yeah, there's a lot that's happening on the KSZ. People just got to be a little patient. Let us do our work and we'll get the results out as soon as we can.
Okay. Well, Ben Turney, the CEO of Kavango Resources, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Mark.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programmes at stopboxmedia.com. Thank you for watching.